Welcome back to Supreme Fuzzler, and we're doing another Venture Brothers review or discussion, however you want to say it. It is episode 2 of season 3, The Doctor is Sin. This is part of the two-parter, that way that Jackson Public and Dark Hammer state in the book I have, about how they basically felt this, and the last episode with the Monarch is a two-parter season premiere for season 3, and that this was a good way to show that Rusty's back to his roots, and learn more about Rusty, and show us what's been going on with him. And it's a great start, honestly, where like you see him go to find these Mexican or these Hispanic people, and he's like, I'm looking for the people who can do an honest day. Excuse me, gosh damn. I should be explaining what I'm talking about. Rusty, the episode starts, and Rusty just flies in, talks to these Hispanic people, says that he can get them an honest day at work for $50, asks for some insane, like, scientific people, and none of them will want to work for him. And then he flies away, and it shows a billboard with Jonas Jr. Obviously, like, as the iPhone or the iPad, or not the iPad, goddamn, the iPod posters from back in the mid 2000s, where like you have the iPod and you were dancing. It's classic poster, like very famous poster style. And it's a great showing of like how Rusty is down on his dumps, where his brother is clearly on the high. They basically show with that he is Apple. And really, JJ just becomes everything in this fucking world. Like, Venture Industries, JJ just does it basically all. Everything that's like Apple, everything that's major, ends up being Jonas Jr.'s thing, it seems. It's a great showing of Rusty's scenario. After that, we go to, Rusty's talking to his brother on the phone, kind of just basically explaining how he wants to be, be in the magazine soon, and how he's going to be rising again. And JJ is kind of just half listening, but not really, honestly. And then Raj calls him from the Johnny Quest shows, and Raj is like trying to put extra shifts on, but Johnny's here, so he can't because he's like his family. And they make fun of Rusty being like, oh, is he asking for money yet? But Rusty luckily doesn't hear it because the General Man-Hours is showing up.
What am I to do? My wife will leave me if I bring him to the house again, but he is like my brother to me.
Brother. Hold on, Raj. I forgot. I got Rusty on the other line.
Rusty? Has he asked you for money yet?
Hold on.
General Man-Hour shows up, and we've seen him before in a few episodes, but it really, now we get to see him at his highest. Like, this is the most you get to talk to him since season 2, the Guess Who's Coming to State Dinner episode, with the whole him talking about his son, now that I think about it. And basically, Rusty is trying to put on airs, obviously. He's trying to put on a show that he is bigger than he is, because he has Triana acting as a secretary, and as Orpheus pretend to be a European space agency for scientific stuff. And then he does like this tour where he's like, I'm showing off, but really it's just moving walkways, which, airports have these days. And then you also see Dr. O running away, trying to be like, oh, I gotta get his different clothes on. It's so funny. Then Dean shows up and has his gravity boots, and it's like, they have 1,001 uses, Pop, in the workplace and in combat situations. So obviously a forced way to try to sell what Rusty's selling here, which is his inventions and what he's doing here. And then shows Dr. O coming into a changing room where Brock and Hank and everyone's getting changed, and he's like, okay, what's my next costume? And Brock explains it, and then it's like, line. It's great. It's really great. Honestly, just let me show you.
Future man. Costumes on the rack, wigs over here, makeup's in the bottom tray. Line! Dr. Venture, come quickly. The future is in peril.
And then we cut back to Rusty, who has a stealth bomber that he's pretending that he's faking toying with, which the General is clearly actually interested in, showing that if Rusty really wanted to work on some like things like that, he would actually be able to get the General's attention, essentially, if he just tried in some way like that. But no, he doesn't actually have a stealth bomber. It shows it's painted. And the General even points out that, why do you have a giant logo on the stealth bomber? To find it, of course. And then it shows a villain kind of showing up and making a bunch of ruckus, and Rusty has to explain basically that because Monarch is no longer his archenemy, which was part of the whole scenario at the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3 now, that he stopped being his arch, that everyone trying to make a name for themselves is attacking Rusty. Brock, who's dressed as like an Indian, kills this guy, just starts wrecking him and shit. And Rusty's like, well, let's go back inside and talk business. But the general's like, nah, I'm done. Thank you for the Fruitopia. Don't remember when last time I got one of those. I'm gonna be out of here. And basically explains how the same stuff that his dad showed him. Nothing's really changed since the era. Which is, it's interesting to think about how Rusty does have the cloning stuff, for instance. But also just, he's a genius in different ways. We've seen the ray shields in the season 2. Like, there's a lot of things that Rusty could utilize if he just wanted to. Honestly, Venture Stein's a great example. Also, where he actually is able to sell us something that's really intense. The pilot episode with the U-Ray is a good example, too. Hank also points out that you can just get money from Jonas Jr., and because he's rolling in the dough, which is a very good point. JJ would not, because they talk about how they have to sell the compound, the Venture compound, possibly, and Jonas Jr. would never allow that. That's just never going to happen. He wouldn't allow that to go down for a place that is also connected with his father and all that crap. But there's no way Rusty, in his pride, that he'll ever be willing to sacrifice that pride and just ask Jonas for help in that manner. He truly feels a jealousy that it's obvious and it's clear, and it's just not justified per se, but it's the whole, dude just suddenly shows up and does so well, and everyone just was like, he's the guy I've been waiting for, basically, in comparison to him, Rusty, and it's just so brutal and sad for Rusty if you think about it in that way. Then this guy shows up, Dr. Killinger, Dr. Henry Killinger, and this.
I am Dr. Henry Killinger, and this is my resume.
After he gets his resume from him, he basically accepts because he says he works pro bono. Rusty's like, of course. And Killinger, with Dr. Orpheus being clearly suspicious of him, suddenly magics up a bunch of workers, and Rusty's like, I can't pay these people, and then you won't. The state will, actually. We're going to part of a work program, which is actually a very smart move. I personally worked through a work program myself in the state, so I'm not so... If you can get that kind of a contract or that kind of setup, it's kind of similar to how Rusty will play it later on, where you get interns or something, maybe, if you really wanted to. And it's neat to see Dr. Henry Killinger. We know him as a villain, kind of. He worked with Monarch, he helped him convey with Dr. Girlfriend, and he was the officiant for the wedding of Monarch and Dr. Girlfriend. So he is clearly part of the villain crew, or at least it seems that way. But now he's here helping Rusty. They even have a whole scene where he's talking to all the heads of the unions and scientific leagues and shit, and just kills them all, just straight melts them. It's insane how brutal Dr. Killinger is. Killinger also makes changes to the business where he has Dr. Orpheus move out because they're going to go back into arachnid research, and that they're hostile taking over conjectural technologies. Billy and White, real quick, are in this episode. It's just so funny and really interesting how ruthless he is. But to show that with some ruthless tactics, Rusty could become a very successful business.
Your powers are useless on me, you silly Billy.
After all that, they have to repair Rusty's soul. So now they get on to Rusty's psyche problems and his just mental issues in general. Rusty clearly has a lot of issues. He has been fucked up by his father. He has his own... so many different problems with him, clearly. And his inadequacies with his father, his jealousy with his brother, his problems with his son's deaths, and his inability to face his son's deaths, clearly, because he has resurrected them multiple times. And his inability to face just the general problem of his whole life. His whole life's a shit show, if you think about it.
Okay. I'm standing in a bag.
Are you?
Then goes to Brock visiting Dr. Orpheus. They basically talk about how Killinger is making the place better. Brock is really pissed because he got served a fucking notice that he has to pay rent for 2 months. for 2 years, excuse me, a retroactive bill. But he has Killinger showed him how he can write it off, so he can get some more from the IRS, so he comes out ahead of the game. So, and how Killinger is doing really well even with the boys. He is teaching Dean really well, improving his studies, and then he shows Hank, and he does this whole like a really. Brock's basically like, I don't know what he's teaching Hank, but you know he's got child psychology PhD apparently. And it's just
I'm not sure about some of the stuff he's teaching Hank.
This man stole from your father. Teach him the meaning of loyalty.
But he says that he's got a PhD in child psychology, so, you know, whatever.
And then has Dr. explaining that he's evil, how he has a bad covenant, and that he's masturbating your soul with the other. I'll just kind of show a clip of it. And then Brock, him, and the Alchemist, who has been in this episode a few times by this point, but also just been around, go to save the Rusty in the compound. So they go run to the compound at this point. Then it goes back to Killinger, who is giving Rusty a new outfit, and how he's got like to set himself up now. Okay, in that whole scene with Rusty's out with the whole outfit, before that, he had been helped through and shown through the vision that his father was keeping him down, and that his brother is what he's jealous of, and we're messing with his birthright, he feels, it seems. Then he gets a new outfit that's clearly a villain outfit, just so clearly a villain outfit. Excuse me, and Killinger's like, I'm a proud papa, and I love my job. He's a great character. Such good writing. Such fantastic characters. I love these people. And I love the character building. Rusty's a great character. Hank and Dean aren't used in this episode very much. But Brock is also very fun. And even Dr. O and even the Alchemist. All fun characters. Really well done. Really well written. Really funny characters. Particularly Rusty in this episode is really, really expanded on here. And his feelings, his feeling of inadequacies, his problems with his brother, his pride and his desire to actually ask his brother for help, despite probably being able to get help. His just everything around him is all those problems that he has, and yet still being Rusty Venture. Then it shows Brock and Kelly and the company, Orpheus and the rest, going to the compound to save them, basically. And they jump across the fence, and there's a bunch of new lasers, which Brock says are new. I assume these are really expensive lasers. They're used later in the series as it progresses, and they must be very expensive. And I happen to wonder how much improvements Killinger gave Rusty in this episode and the time that his employees were around. He gets him his lasers, probably improves his security system as a whole. It helps his finances, fucks with those business people who are effing with him, the union workers and the science guys. Everything, he really probably helps set his affairs in order in this little piece. And I wonder by how much, honestly. For some reason, Brock, Dr. Orpheus is like, we have to get dressed up in order to go attack him and save Rusty. I don't understand this part. Dr. Orpheus says because Alchemist asks, why do we have to get dressed up like this? And it's like, because he is magic and he knows my face, is what he says. Dr. Orpheus says. Alchemist points out they're also magic, and he's like, well, we're slightly less magic than he is. Which is like, okay, I get that he's more powerful than you, but what does changing an outfit to have to do with anything? If he's magic, if he's really magic.
We're somewhat less magic, so we must resort to Mr. Sampson's plan of subterfuge and attack. Are you finished?
I'm very excited about this plan.
Couldn't he just sense you? I don't get why changing your outfit. I don't understand the point of this, other than to set up the joke that's to come. Which is Al and them go to bust the door down. The card reader doesn't work, so Al's like, all right. And Al's got a big ass gun on him. He's like, all right, I got this.
I swear this has never happened to me before.
But of course, it doesn't work exactly. Then it shows Rusty cutting his hand and doing a whole blood signing about it, or debating about signing a document in blood, and how he's going to get exclusive arching rights and powerful people behind him. And he's like, oh, that's great. Who'd you choose for me? And they're like, you chose for you, your brother. And Dr. Rusty's like, he can't arch me. He's not and he realizes that he's the one who's a supervillain. And Killinger is like, is that's not what you've seen in your visions? Act now, and the Venchmen are waiting for your order. It really is interesting to think about how Rusty has that debate and that discussion in his head.
But I'm not a...
Aren't you? Is this not what your heart was trying to tell you in your visions? Sign it. Make your blood feud official. Act now. Frenchmen are standing by for your order.
In the end, Brock and the crew bust on the door. They're like, oh, we're going to fight. Venchmen walk past him, and Rusty is naked, just sitting there. Apparently, Rusty refused, which is interesting to think about. All the power in the world was in front of him. He could save his business, save everything, but he was not willing to go the distance of the dark side, or whatever you want to say. Whether he's like stuck to the ideal of the hero that his father was, whether he truly believes in that ideal, it's interesting to think about, because what he says here, he's like, he thinks I'm a bad person. He truly doesn't really understand why someone would consider him a villain. He believes, and is, I agree, not a villain. He believes that he's a good guy. He's on the side of the protagonist. He is devoted to being a protagonist, and does not understand why. And it's interesting to Brock, because like when he's asked, "Am I a bad guy?" Brock's like, which is essentially how Rusty is. He's got some bad ethics, a few questionable morals, and some weird shit, and a lot of issues. But he definitely, like with women and with, he's a good father, but he's like really overly obsessed with his boys. He's got inadequacy problems, jealousy problems, pill popping problems, so many problems. But he's not exactly the worst person. He's not exactly a villain. He's not willing to be ruthless. He's not the way that they portrayed Monarch in season 2, and how they showcased how ruthless Monarch really is. How Monarch is a villain. He's willing to torture. He's willing to hurt people and do some really crazy shit. It's just so awesome. And then, like, the last scenes are Killinger in the sky doing the Shakespeare quote of, like, all men and women are equal, and they all have a plays to play. They have their entrances and their exits, but it all is some shit. I forget the whole quote. I'm forgetting the whole quote, but it's a Shakespeare quote. I've seen it before. It's interesting. And then General Manhowers is for some reason in the sky with Killinger, which I've never thought about how that could maybe imply that Killinger and Manhowers are the same person, or like similar in some way or the other. Huh. Because why Manhowers there? He's not magical, or is he? I don't know. Freaking weird. Anyways, and then after credits scene shows Rusty.
Oh, June 6, 2003? I really gotta get my together.
He messed with a snake. He opens a package and there's a snake. He's like, oh my god, but then it turns to dust because he's like, oh my god, June 6, 2003. I gotta get my shit together. Truly, Rusty needs to get his shit together. Great episode. I love Rusty. I love the development of Rusty. Brock's a great character. Al's always a great character. I love any episode with him. Dr. O, same. Great character. Love every episode with him. Triana even does some decent lines in here, even though they're like 5, but they're all good. Rusty, though, developing his character was really the core of this episode. Killinger's a fun character, too. Great developing character. And intriguing that he wanted to work with him. Clearly, he's a Guild of Calamitous Intent person. The document that Rusty was going to sign has a Guild of Calamitous Intent seal on it. But why? I was thinking about how, like, would it be a huge uproar to the OSI if Rusty had turned trade? Clearly, he was going to lose Brock, I think. I don't know exactly, but he was going to probably lose Brock in this scenario because Brock's OSI. And then there's that, like, Brock has a mission, clearly, that's developed later. I don't know how well this would have gone for Rusty, even in the event that he truly does it all by the book betrayal. Because it's technically a betrayal. He is officially going from the good side, protagonist side, to the antagonist side. It's an interesting thought for us. And it's also Rusty Venture. A venture. And it is a Cain and Abel thing. Like, then he gets Venture versus Venture. Like, all the implications of that are so insane for the politics that are developed in the series and are being developed in the series. Great episode, great characters. I love Venture Brothers. Watch the show, please. Let me know what you guys think about the episode in the comments. Subscribe for more. We'll be discussing more Venture Season 3, Episode 3 next. What episode is that? That's the Sergeant Hatred episode. But I don't remember the episode name off the top of my head. It's been a while. I know Episode 5 is Buddy System, which is an alright episode. Not my favorite. I don't like Dermot. Sorry. I haven't got to him yet, but whatever. We're getting there. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter if you want. And that's all for now. Goodbye. Venturoos. Eh?